Chris Paul is one of the most underrated and underappreciated point guards in NBA history. He's a multiple-time All-Star and a two-time NBA champion, but people just seem to forget him as a player. He was a regular double-double machine, and I don't think the Celtics beat the Lakers in the '08 Finals without him. So, if no one else will do it, I guess I will. This is the career of Chris Paul. Chris Paul attended his hometown school, the University of Kentucky, where he played for about 2 seasons. Paul was an SEC All-Freshman but failed to make it into the Final Four in either of his seasons as a Wildcat. Following the '06 season, Paul would announce that he was forgoing his final 2 seasons and would declare for the NBA draft. Paul averaged 9, 4, and 4, which led the Phoenix Suns to draft him with the 21st overall pick in the 2006 NBA draft. He wouldn't be a Sun for long, though, because he was traded to the Boston Celtics on draft night for cash considerations. Little did we know at the time was that this trade would drastically change the future of the Boston Celtics. Paul would have a pretty quiet rookie year, only putting up 6 points and about 4 assists, but things would change that offseason as the Celtics would famously bring in Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen to form a big three along Paul Pierce. The '08 season would not just prove big for the Celtics, but for Paul as well, as he boosted up his number to 10 points and 5 assists a game. The Celtics that year would also end up beating the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals and make Chris Paul a champion. The next 2 years wouldn't end in much playoff success, but Chris Paul was only getting better and better. And year after year, he was only improving his numbers. This would set a narrative that Boston didn't just have a big three, but maybe also a big four, as Rondo is now an all-star and could make a big play after big play when the Celtics needed it. His great play would send the Boston Celtics back to the finals in the 2010 season, where they would once again meet the Los Angeles Lakers. Injuries would derail the Boston Celtics, and they would end up losing to Kobe and the Lakers in 7 games. This would end up being the beginning of the end for the Celtics, as they would lose Ray Allen in 2012 and ended up blowing it up after trading both Pierce and Garnett in 2013. But Chris would end up being spared from all these trades and stay on the Celtics for the 2013 to 2014 season. Chris Paul and the Celtics would end up only winning 25 games that year, and early on in the next season would end up shoveling the last bit of dirt onto the Big Four as they would trade Chris Paul to the Mavericks for Jay Crowder. Paul would average about 9 and 7 as a Maverick, but would famously constantly butt heads with Mavericks head coach Rick Carlisle. On February 24th in a game against the Toronto Raptors, Paul and Carlisle were seen having an argument on the bench, which would lead to Paul getting benched for the rest of the game. The rest of the season would have some ups and downs, but the Mavs still would end up making the playoffs. During Game 2 of their first-round series against the Houston Rockets, Chris was sent out of the game and sat for the rest of the postseason due to an apparent back injury, but most believe it was a mutual decision made by him and Carlisle. This would obviously mark an end to his time as a Maverick, and he would announce he was signing a 1-year deal to join the Sacramento Kings. CP3 would get his numbers back up this season, as he would average 11 and 11 as the starting point guard for the Kings. The Kings would only win 33 games this year, though, and miss the playoffs. This would lead Paul to once again join another team, as he would sign a 2-year deal to join Dwayne Wade and the Chicago Bulls. Paul's numbers would dip as he was an inconsistent starter for the Bulls, but would end up sneaking into the playoffs as the 8th seed. The Bulls would obviously lose in the first round to the first-seeded Boston Celtics, Paul's former team. CP3 would agree to a buyout with the Bulls, and at the end of the season would join his 5th team, as he would sign with the New Orleans Pelicans. Paul would get his numbers back up to 8 and 8, but would once again fail to impress. But he would end up putting up crazy stat lines like these. He would fail to do anything big in the playoffs, though, as the Pels would lose in the second round to the Warriors in 5 games. Chris Paul would be bounced around to another team and end up joining the Los Angeles Lakers. His first year as a Laker, he would have a respectable season, as he would average 9 points and 8 assists, but the Lakers would end up missing the playoffs. The very next year, though, the Lakers would make a blockbuster trade and bring in Paul's former teammate, Anthony Davis. This year would be huge for the Lakers, as they would not only make it to the finals, but they would actually end up winning it. Now, you can make all the little Mickey jokes you want, but Chris Paul is now a 2-time NBA champion. Before we move on, let's just admire this photo one more time. Sadly, though, the next year would not prove nearly as successful for Chris Paul, as he would leave the Lakers and sign a deal to join the Atlanta Hawks. Paul is now a full-on backup and averaged 3 and 3 as a Hawk. The Hawks would send him to the Clippers in a deal to bring in Lou Williams. Paul would bring up his averages all the way up to 7 points per game, but would end up losing the Western Conference Finals to the Phoenix Suns. The next year, though, CP3 would once again re-sign to the LA Lakers, but would fail to impress as age had seemingly caught up to him. Paul would end that year as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I think that's about it for the career of Chris Paul. No one signed him in the offseason. I don't think anyone has any plans to sign him in the future. I hope you all enjoyed a quick run-through of what I feel is one of the most underappreciated NBA careers we've ever seen. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. See ya!
Favorite point guard, Chris Paul, man. Chris Paul, man. What's up, man?
Who?
You mean Chris Paul?
Nah, who are you?
Oh, you mean Chris? Oh, you going first?